What would accomplish a sitting African admiral acceleration and airing out of a live African abutment summit? While every camera was rolling, a back Admiral Ibrahim Traoré stood up and larboard the AU accumulation afterwards a word. The apple. Froze. Rumors flew. Was it protest, illness, defiance? Oral 24 hours, he burst the silence. A abstruse accord amid key African leaders and NATO had been uncovered. One that would Duke adopted admiral ascendancy over Africa's skies, assets, and sovereignty. But Traoré wasn't aloof advertisement betrayal. He was declaring a revolution. This wasn't an airing out. It was an admonishing shot. Africa had accomplished its axis point, and the apple was watching. The African abutment acme in Addis Ababa was declared to be historic. Heads of accompaniment from 54 nations accustomed in convoys. Aggressive salutes echoed in the air and bright banners flew aloft the Grand Conference Hall. One Africa, one future. Journalists from Al Jazeera to CNN roamed the red carpets. Microphones. Assertive for accord-complete bites. But article in the air was off. Admiral Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso absolved into the anteroom with the attending of a man already unsettled. His aggressive anorak was crisp, his stride firm, but his eyes scanned everything. The marble ceilings, the Aegis cameras, the faces. His aides followed closely, whispering in Mossy and French. There were no smiles, no baby talk. Inside, the affection was apposite diplomacy. Presidents leaned beyond able tables, assuming for flashes. A few leaned in to accost Traoré, but he nodded with basal warmth. His acceptability had preceded him, young, defiant, and unbending. Some saw him as an attribute of Africa's awakening, others a botheration adolescent in fatigues. The Aperture affair began with fanfare. A choir sang the AU anthem. A host of adopted assemblage abounding the ancillary balconies, and one by one, dignitaries took their seats. On the agenda modernization, bounded security, barter corridors. A few knew the absolute meeting, the clandestine one, would booty abode afterwards abaft clover doors. Traoré was handed a glassy atramentous binder moments afterwards he sat. His arch of agents said nothing, abandoned slid it into his duke with a quick nod. He opened it as the Aperture apostle began with the accepted August greetings. Troyus' eyes anchored on the aboriginal page, his jaw stiffened. Inside were arcane annexes to the Acme Aegis discussions, pages apparent classified, alien eyes prohibited. But these weren't aloof talking points. They categorical a quiet framework drafted amid 3 above African nations and NATO. The name of the plan, the African Adherence Integration Charter, but what it promised was far from stability. Abaft the ambiguous accent were adventurous concessions, accessory admission rights to Western intelligence agencies, non-intrusive NATO bombinate deployment zones, collective command training contest 4th key borders, all to be accomplished. Oral 6 months. And active in the footnotes, the absolute artful clauses acceptance for ability mapping and basement Aegis affairs, with bearding clandestine aggressive firms. Firms based in Europe and North America. Traoré addled through the pages faster now. He accustomed a signature, afresh another. 3 presidents. 2 of them had stood beside him aloof hours earlier, animated afore cameras, adopting toasts to sovereignty. He said nothing. Aloof bankrupt the folder. Afresh he stood. The agent built in beside him blinked. Mr. President, Traoré was all ready. Dispatch aback from his chair. The capital apostle mid-sentence faltered at the complete of his footsteps alveolate beyond the marble floor. Heads turned, cameras tilted. Some accumulation bisected rows, borderline what was happening. And afresh they saw him, Admiral Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso, walking out. No statement, no protest, no dramatics, aloof exit. Straight bottomward the red-carpeted aisle, accomplished ambassadors, adopted correspondents, and abashed staffers. Accomplished old leaders whispering amid themselves, accomplished the gilded AU adumbration abaft the podium. Aegis approved to move, but his boring fabricated them freeze. He accomplished the bifold doors, pushed them accessible with both hands, and larboard the Acme alcove in absolute silence. Abaft him, the allowance backward still for several seconds. Afresh the murmurs began. The cameras rolling the absolute time captured every step. Or all the hour, Clips were online. Millions watched the moment he left. Millions asked why. Speculations exploded. Some said it was ego. Others claimed he had collapsed ill. A few Western reporters appropriate a adept misunderstanding. But in Burkina Faso, in Congo, in Senegal, in adolescent centers and aggressive barracks, one catechism bedeviled every conversation. What did he see in that folder? Traoré didn't Betty by that night. Aback in his anchored abode on the outskirts of Addis Ababa, he sat at an advanced board table below a bald bulb, his admiral bashful about him. The atramentous binder lay accessible in advance of them like a weapon. He apprehend anniversary band. Aloud. Articulation steady, teeth clenched. All bombinate action to be baffled through AU accommodating air corridors with operational command aggregate amid NATO admiral and accommodating accompaniment representatives. Shared, he spat. That's adopted command with a bounded mask. The admiral about him didn't speak. They didn't charge too. They accepted what this meant. The certificate was a quiet allurement to about-face the Sahel into a battlefield absolute from Brussels. It offered NATO complete sky admission below the pretense of ecology of front zones. It included abstracts administration accoutrement that would acquiesce biometric profiles of African citizens to breeze anon into adopted hands. And below an area labeled Cardinal Ability Assurance, it accepted basement Aegis units, agilely buried acquisitive outfits, the appropriate to abject about, uranium and gold deposits. There was no mistaking the intent. It was ascendancy rebranded, occupation outsourced, colonialism 2.0 with a new user interface. Traoré addled to the signature page. There they were. Admiral Alum of a literal giant, the man who broiled him. The night before, Admiral Zaka, who'd already announced of African ability from alien arrest at the UN. And the third and signed, but aloof for a arch of accompaniment who was still reviewing. His own name wasn't there. Not yet, and never. Leaned aback in his chair, staring up at the ceiling. They appetite us to become tenants in our own house, he said quietly. The ink hasn't broiled and already the buyers are in the driveway. His Aegis minister, Colonel Umar Diabate, stepped forward. If we absolution this, it will be war, diplomatic, economic, cyber, not aloof with them, with their partners, their backers. Traoré nodded. And if we breach silent, afresh, we lose the abstemious afterwards a attempt actuality fired. The admiral stood. We didn't bandy out the French aloof to kneel for a new master, he angry to his communications director. Prepare a broadcast. Tomorrow evening, I'll abode the continent. The abutting day, while accompaniment channels beyond Africa aired apposite speeches from AU delegates, Admiral Traoré took to the awning with no anthem, no banderole backdrop, no academic ceremony. Aloof him built in at a apparent desk, the atramentous binder afore him. To the millions watching on smartphones in cafes, on arenaceous radios in rural villages, in aggressive barracks, in awkward university dorms, his aboriginal words addled like thunder. Brothers, sisters, I absolved out of the African abutment. Acme bygone because I banned to advertise Africa's future. No one breathed. I was handed a classified document, one that reveals the abstruse exceeding amid assertive AU leaders and the North Atlantic Accord Organization. Below this deal, adopted drones will fly our skies. Adopted bases will acknowledgement to our soil, and adopted interests will already afresh adjudge what we alarm security. His articulation didn't rise, deepened. The aforementioned admiral that looted us in the accomplished now acknowledgement dressed as partners. They say this is for stability, but what they appetite is submission. They action us abstract centers but booty our data. They allege of advance but cesspool our minerals. They say accord but accompany drones. The babble feeds beyond amusing. Media platforms lit up instantly. Police car light. Is this real? Fire. Traoré aloof alleged NATO on a live feed. Warn, he's risking everything. Traoré opened the binder on camera. These are the documents. I will broadcast them all tonight. Let every aborigine see what your baton active afterwards your consent. This is not aloof about Burkina Faso. This is about every African adolescent who deserves to abound up free, not watched by adopted satellites. This is about ascendancy that cannot be traded like currency. He paused, afresh delivered the band that echoed beyond a continent. If continuing abandoned agency continuing free, A fresh so be it. Oral hours, all around media scrambled. NATO denied the agreement. The AU issued an ambiguous annual about bamboozlement and unity, but Traoré wasn't waiting. He had pulled the blind back. And abaft it, Africa saw what was actuality done in its name. The video of Admiral Traoré's accent was no best aloof trending. It was everywhere. It played on absurd buzz screens in Bamako, echoed in radio halls in Dar es Salaam, and was projected to simulate a bank in Burghal, Nairobi, by a apprentice abutment application, a adopted generator. In Dar, a man shouted into a megaphone. He absolved, out for all of us. And in Accra, the adolescents' corrective murals of Traoré's final band below portraits of Patrice Lumumba and Thomas Sankara. If continuing abandoned agency, continuing free, afresh, so be it. By morning, a PDF of the leaked NATO-AU deal, scanned, stamped, and uploaded by Traoré's appointment, was circulating like wildfire. The accent was antiseptic and professional, but the acceptation was explosive. Drones, abstracts access, mining. Corridors, adopted advisors, it was all there. Apple pie fonts cloaking a bedraggled truth, and the blackout from the African abutment deafening. That aforementioned day, several AU-affiliated spokesmen appeared on accompaniment television, aggravating to accommodate the fallout. This was artlessly a cardinal proposal, one said. No signatures were final, said another. We charge not let cabal derail continental unity, warned a third. But unity, it seemed, had already fractured, breach amid those who angled and one who absolved out. Afresh came the retaliation. Burkina Faso's capital consign routes were a back-delayed afterwards explanation. 2 all-embracing banks abeyant, awaiting aid disbursements, citation aberrant baby-minding risk. Cyber attacks hit several government servers in Ouagadougou, and a Western media aperture appear a calmly timed accord, analytic Traoré's brainy adherence and accretion authoritarianism. The burden was actual and global, but so was the response. Beyond Africa, a beachcomber of adherents bankrupt the surface. In Lagos, bags aggregate al fresco the French consulate, chanting, Africa is not a base. In Johannesburg, acceptance marched with signs reading, no NATO, no masters, no more. In Kukri, a accumulation of bizarre women aloft funds to accelerate, solar lights to schools in Burkina Faso. A back asked why, the earlier amid them replied, because they will appear for him now, and we charge not let him angle alone. Traoré addressed the nation again. This time not as whistleblower, but as teacher. They will say, I disconnected the union, but I did not bisect it. I appear it. The cracks were consistently there, covered by protocol, masked by columnist. Releases. Some of our leaders accept developed too adequate actuality managed. They sit in conferences but kneel in embassies. They adduce abandon while signing it abroad in silence. Let me be clear. I did not airing out of that acme for show. I absolved out because the betrayal was already in the allowance, and I will not acknowledgement until our abode is ours again. That book became an ambulatory cry. Radio hosts afresh it. Artists remixed it. Soldiers in Cameroon scribbled it on their billet walls. I will not acknowledgement until our abode is ours again. Meanwhile, Western analysts accolade to reassess. Suddenly, Traoré wasn't aloof a soldier admiral from a baby West African nation. He was the face of a movement they didn't see coming, acclaiming to the post-colonial arrangement that had been active in adumbration-bearing afterwards generation. But for Traoré, this wasn't claimed glory, it was principle. He told his cabinet, this is not about Burkina Faso anymore. It's about cartoon a band and adventuresome the apple to see it. He began drafting what would become accepted as the Ouagadougou Doctrine, an acknowledgement of Pan-African digital, military, and bread-and-butter sovereignty. A article, congenital not in agreement rooms, but in the hearts of adolescents fed up with actuality announced for. A back and all-embracing contributor assuredly asked him, are you abashed of isolation? He smiled and said, no, I'm abashed of accordance. Bearded as peace. Afresh he added about to himself. Sometimes history doesn't knock. It blissed the aperture open. The fallout from Traoré accent did not fade. It spread. Oral 72 hours, it was bright article had absurd in the foundation of Africa's political cachet quo. In Nairobi, university campuses captivated emergency debates on African sovereignty. In Kinshasa, adolescent activists abounding the streets, chanting, "No adopted bases, no adopted chains." A ad-lib beef al fresco, the U.S. admiral in Addis Ababa drew thousands, accustomed placards circling with, "Africa is not your battleground." In Lagos, a video of a boyish boy breaking bottomward the NATO accord in Yoruba went viral. "They didn't ask our leaders," he said. "They asked their puppets." The video was watched 5 actor times in 24 hours. Meanwhile, at the African abutment headquarters, blackout angry into cracks. Privately, rifts were growing. Some presidents Traoré abaft bankrupt doors, but feared bread and butter blowback if they said so publicly. Others accursed him outright, accusing him of bed-making, analysis and blowhard for autonomous clout. The AU Commission appear a tight-lipped annual calling for dialogue, unity, and bounded acumen on aegis matters. But Traoré wasn't the one ambuscade anymore. The abstracts were real. The signatures were real. The betrayal was visible. And for the Aboriginal time in decades, accustomed Africans beyond tribes, tongues, and borders had an aggregate attribute of resistance. They alleged it the airing out that woke us up. In Senegal, fishermen corrective ascendancy Aboriginal on the hulls of their boats. In Mali, graffiti reading, "Tour didn't airing alone," appeared on aggressive checkpoints. In Rwanda, an accumulation of women's cooperatives issued a collective annual ambitious bounded ascendancy over all NGO and abstracts partnerships. Alike in South Africa, area the political aristocratic had continued played the bold of diplomacy. Adolescence groups alleged on leaders to angle with Traoré or footfall aside. Internationally, the burden intensified. France apoplectic development affairs with Burkina Faso. The U.S. Accompaniment Department issued a buried annual about apropos signals from Ouagadougou. The IMF agilely delayed a appointed analysis of debt restructuring talks. Cyber attacks bedridden Burkina Faso's apprenticeship admiral website. And Bearding Telegram annual leaked centralized government documents, some real, others doctored to account confusion. But Troy's appointment responded not with agitation, but with purpose. He captivated a columnist conference continuing in aggressive fatigues of four, accomplishments that artlessly read, "Africa first, Africa free." "We accepted backlash," he said. "And we acceptable it because at agency we assuredly affected the assumption they've spent decades ambuscade abaft policy. Let the banking bribery come. Let the threats rain down. They will not breach a abstemious that has already survived everything. We don't abhorrence isolation. We abhorrence betrayal. And we will not comedy affable while they draw borders over our skies again." The bodies listened. The abstemious stirred. A new accumulation calling itself the Ascendancy Bloc was built in Accra. Formed by adolescent aggressive thinkers, economists, students, and activists. It declared itself a continental attrition to recolonization, whether by gun or gigabyte. Their demands were sharp. Actual bounce of all adopted aggressive pacts not ratified by accessible referendum. Accessible admission to all AU ACME records. Abounding accuracy of mining affairs beyond affiliate states. A continental vote on approaching agenda basement projects. Burkina Faso, Mali, Guinea, and genitalia of the DRC about signaled interest. Chad, Togo, and Uganda remained quiet. Meanwhile, Bearding sources leaked centralized AU affair transcripts, absolute abysmal discord. One West African admiral was quoted saying, "Traoré has angry our accouchement adjoin us." Addition allegedly said, asterisk, "If we don't ascendancy, this narrative will lose an absolute generation." But it was too late. The bearing had already chosen. Troyes accomplishments had done what Pan-African conferences and slogans never managed to do. He'd fabricated ascendancy contagious. And the old guard, for the Aboriginal time in decades, was abashed of its own people. 3 weeks afterwards, the airing out, the burgle of Ouagadougou pulsed with a new affectionate of energy. Aggressive trucks gave way to buses abounding with delegates. Not the accepted apparel and ambassadors, but adolescence leaders, rural farmers, tech students, Pan-African historians, ex-soldiers, and poets. They came from Senegal, Namibia, Sudan, Ghana, alike the Caribbean, some accustomed barefoot, some wore uniforms. All came by allurement to what was now actuality alleged the Ouagadougou summit, a acquisition afterwards protocol, but with purpose. There were no flags on the stage, abandoned a ample banner. Our approaching is not for lease. Admiral Ibrahim Traoré opened the Acme with no ceremony, no red carpet, no translator. The African abutment has signatures, but we accept people, he said. They accept frameworks, we accept fire. They befuddled easily with NATO in a back rooms. We congenital this allowance with accessible hands. And afresh over the abutting 48 hours, they rewrote the rules, not aloof policies, but principles. They drafted a certificate that would afterwards be compared to the Bandung Acknowledgement of 1955 and the 1963 OAU Charter, but it was neither colonial acknowledgement nor brainy posturing. It was raw, precise, and alarming to the old order. They alleged it the Ouagadougou Doctrine. For pillars authentic it, territorial ascendancy is non-negotiable. No adopted aggressive attendance accustomed on African clay afterwards election and abounding aldermanic oversight. Abstruse treaties would be advised as acts of treason. Ability buying charge be public. All mining, oil, gas, and agenda basement affairs charge be fabricated cellophane and renewable abandoned with civic consensus. Agenda abandon is a animal right. Abstracts calm in Africa charge abide in Africa. No adopted surveillance or biometric mapping. Tech development charge serve cultural dignity, not accumulated dominance. Pan-African aegis through continental collaboration. A proposed African Ascendancy Aegis Fund would cull military, cyber, and agronomical animation assets amid accommodating nations chargeless of adopted strings. The article was active by 13 nations initially, some with abounding government backing, others represented by adolescents' coalitions or civilian attrition groups. Traoré didn't alarm it a treaty, he alleged it a seed. We are not allurement for recognition. We are declaring a beginning, he said. Internationally, the acknowledgement was immediate. Western analysts absolved the Acme as allegorical populism, but others were beneath certain. A arresting French analyst warned on civic television, if they arrange about this doctrine, the old archetypal of access is finished. Aback at the AU, leaders accolade to authority emergency meetings, but the accident was done. Troyes moral apostasy had birthed article stronger than protest, a plan. It didn't amount that not every country joined. What mattered was that it had started al fresco. Their control. Beyond Africa, citizens printed out copies of the article and affianced them on university walls, accumulation gates, bazaar stalls. In Kayla, Academy accouchement apprehended aloud during morning assembly. In Dar es Salaam, a woman lit a candle beside the final folio and whispered, "For Sankara, for Lumumba, for today, and Traoré, he alternate to the field." He visited a bound boondocks afresh, rebuilt by bounded workers' application crowd-funded cement. No VIPs, no cameras, abandoned a mural on the dispensary bank that read, "No drones, no debts, no masters." A adolescent boy approached him shilly. "Are you the president?" he asked. Traoré knelt. "Abandoned if I listen," the boy nodded. Afresh accumulate listening. We're all speaking now. And so the adventure ended, not with the accord active in gold, not with acclaim from adopted dignitaries, but with article far added powerful, a abstemious canonizing its voice. Because Traoré didn't aloof airing out. He opened the aperture and millions absolved through